They laughed at the bunker until the storm buried the town, and the only way to survive was beneath the man they mocked. Marcus Hale tightened the final steel bolt on the reinforced hatch, the metallic clang echoing faintly across the frozen ground of Silver Ridge, Colorado, before being swallowed by the stillness of the mountain air. He paused for a moment, gloved hand resting on the cold surface, and scanned the horizon with the same quiet intensity he once carried in uniform. The sky was clear, deceptively calm, painted in soft shades of winter blue, but Marcus knew better. He had spent years learning how to read what most people ignored: the subtle shift in wind direction, the unusual silence of migrating birds, the thicker coats on deer that wandered closer to town weeks earlier than usual. Nature didn't announce danger with words. It whispered it, and only those trained, or willing, to listen ever heard it. Marcus exhaled slowly, his breath curling into the frigid air, before stepping back toward his modest cabin, the hidden entrance to his underground bunker now sealed and nearly invisible beneath a careful layer of packed snow and earth. From a distance, it looked like nothing at all, just another patch of winter ground. That was the point, but not everyone saw it that way. Down the slope, where the road curved toward the newer properties, laughter carried faintly through the air. Marcus didn't need to hear the words to know they were about him. They always were. Ethan Collins leaned casually against the polished railing of his elevated deck, a glass of bourbon in hand as he gestured toward Marcus's property with a smirk. "I'm telling you," he said to the small group gathered around the outdoor heater. The guy dug himself a damn tomb. "All that concrete, all that steel for what? Snow." Rachel Collins laughed softly, adjusting her designer coat as she glanced up the ridge. "It's not just a bunker, Ethan. I heard he installed air filters, Bopos water tanks, even some kind of underground generator. It's like he's expecting the end of the world." Beside them, Jake Turner held up his phone, recording with a grin. "Day 42 of living next to the mountain mole," he said to his followers. "While I'm up here enjoying the view, this dude is literally burying himself alive. Guess some people don't realize it's 2026, not the Cold War." The comments flooded in instantly, laughing emojis stacking across the screen. Marcus saw the drone later that afternoon, hovering just beyond his tree line, its faint buzz cutting through the quiet. He didn't wave it off, didn't react at all. He simply continued stacking sealed supply crates near the concealed hatch, methodical and precise, as if the outside world didn't exist. Because, in a way, it didn't matter. Not compared to what was coming. The local forecast still called it an unusually strong winter system, but Marcus had stopped trusting forecasts years ago. Data could be wrong. Patterns rarely were. And everything he'd observed over the past 12 months, the rapid pressure drops, the erratic storm tracks, the way early snowfalls melted too quickly only to return heavier, pointed toward something far worse than unusual. It pointed toward a system that would overwhelm infrastructure, cripple response times, and turn comfort into liability. That's why his bunker wasn't just a shelter, it was a system. 30 feet beneath the surface, reinforced concrete walls formed a sealed environment capable of withstanding extreme pressure and temperature. A geothermal loop maintained stable internal heat. Independent air filtration ensured breathable oxygen even if the outside air turned lethal. Weeks' worth of food, water, and medical supplies were stored in carefully labeled compartments. Every detail had been planned, tested, and rechecked, not out of fear, but out of certainty. Still, to the people of Silver Ridge, it was nothing more than an obsession. At the local diner, where conversations carried louder than the coffee steam, Marcus's name had become shorthand for paranoia. "You see what Hale's building now," one man chuckled, shaking his head. "Underground bunker. Says it's for winter." Another scoffed. "Winter? We get snow every year. What's he think? The sky's gonna fall." Even the hardware store owner, Bill Dawson, couldn't resist a jab when Marcus came in for supplies. "Stocking up again?" he asked, scanning another purchase of industrial-grade batteries and insulation materials. "You planning to outlast the rest of us down there?" Marcus simply handed over cash, his expression unreadable. "Just making sure I'm prepared." Bill laughed. "Prepared for what?" Marcus met his gaze for a brief second. "For when being prepared is the only thing that matters." The answer lingered longer than the joke, but Bill waved it off with a grin. Up on the ridge, life continued as normal. The Collinses hosted small gatherings, their glass-walled home glowing warmly against the snowy backdrop. Jake posted daily updates, framing himself as the face of modern resilience, solar-powered, digitally connected, and completely in control. And Marcus? He kept working, quietly, relentlessly. By early January, the temperature began to drop faster than usual. The wind shifted, subtle at first, then sharper, colder, carrying a bite that didn't belong to typical seasonal change. Marcus noticed. Others didn't. The first official warning came on a Tuesday morning, a severe winter storm advisory. Schools closed early. People stocked up on groceries. But no one panicked. Not yet. Because storms came and went. That's what they always did. But this one didn't feel like the others. By Thursday, the advisory escalated to a blizzard warning. Meteorologists began using stronger language: historic, record-breaking, dangerous. Still, most residents treated it as an inconvenience, not a threat. Ethan checked his backup systems. Jake made another video. Rachel ordered extra supplies. And Marcus sealed the hatch. That evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, the sky darkened in a way that felt wrong. Too heavy, too sudden, as if something vast was pressing down from above. The wind didn't pick up gradually. It arrived all at once, slamming into the ridge with a force that rattled windows and bent trees. Snow followed, not in gentle flakes, but in dense, blinding sheets that erased visibility within minutes. Temperatures plummeted at a rate that defied expectation, dropping from 15 degrees Fahrenheit to well below zero in a matter of hours. Power lines swayed and snapped. Lights flickered across Silver Ridge. And then, just as quickly, everything went dark. Inside his bunker, Marcus Hale sat in steady, controlled silence, listening, not to panic, not to chaos, but to the distant, muffled roar of a storm he had already prepared to survive. The storm didn't arrive gradually. It consumed Silver Ridge in a matter of hours, turning everything above ground into a violent, frozen wasteland. What began as heavy snowfall quickly escalated into a relentless whiteout, with winds screaming across the ridge and temperatures plunging far below zero. Inside the Collins glass-walled home, the first real sign of danger came when the power died without warning. The lights flickered once, then everything went dark. The silence that followed was immediate and unsettling, broken only by the low, constant roar of the storm outside. Ethan stood near the control panel, pressing buttons that no longer responded, his confidence fading with each second. The backup should have kicked in, he said, more to himself than to Rachel. But it didn't, and within minutes, the flaw in their beautiful home became painfully clear. The massive glass walls that once offered breathtaking views now radiated cold into the house like ice. The temperature dropped fast, too fast. Rachel pulled her coat tighter, her breath already visible in the air. Ethan, it's freezing. By midnight, the house was no longer livable. Frost spread across the interior surfaces, creeping along the glass like a living thing. Every attempt to restore power failed. Every assumption they had made about comfort and control collapsed under the weight of the storm. Down the slope, Jake Turner faced the same reality, only faster. His solar panels were buried beneath thick snow, his backup generator frozen solid in the brutal cold. He tried everything, pulling the cord again and again, adjusting valves with stiff fingers, but nothing worked. His phone had no signal, no connection to the outside world he depended on. The silence inside his house grew heavier with each passing minute, broken only by the sharp cracking sounds of pipes freezing and splitting behind the walls. Panic setting quickly, Jake wrapped himself in blankets, pacing, trying to think, but the cold crept in faster than his thoughts could keep up. By 2 a.m., denial was gone. Survival was all that mattered. Back at the Collins house, Rachel's hands were shaking uncontrollably now, her lips pale as she struggled to stay warm. "We can't stay here," she said, her voice barely steady. This time, Ethan didn't argue. He didn't check the system again or look for another solution. Instead, he said the one thing he never thought he would. "We go to Marcus." The words felt heavy, carrying months of mockery and dismissal. But none of that mattered anymore. Not with the cold closing in. They layered whatever clothing they could find, wrapping themselves tightly before forcing the door open against the growing snowdrift. The wind hit them instantly, violent and disorienting, stealing their breath and blinding their vision. It was worse than they imagined. The world outside had vanished into swirling white chaos. Visibility reduced to only a few feet. Each step forward felt uncertain, the snow deep and shifting beneath them. They moved slowly, holding on to each other, guided only by memory and desperation. Not far away, Jake had reached the same conclusion. His house was already too cold to survive in. Every instinct told him to move, to find shelter, any shelter, before it was too late. He stumbled outside, immediately overwhelmed by the storm, the cold biting through his layers as if they weren't there. For a moment, fear nearly paralyzed him. Then, through the whiteout, he saw faint movement, two figures struggling uphill. The Collinses. He forced himself toward them, each step heavier than the last. When they finally met, there were no explanations, no hesitation, just a shared understanding of how close they were to dying. "Marcus!" Ethan shouted over the wind. Jake nodded, unable to speak, his face already numb. Together, they turned toward the ridge. The climb was brutal. The wind grew stronger the higher they went, pushing against them with relentless force. Snow reached their knees, then their thighs, slowing every movement. More than once, Jake stumbled and nearly stayed down. Rachel's strength faded quickly, her movements slower, her responses delayed as hypothermia began to take hold. But they kept going, because stopping wasn't an option. When they finally reached Marcus's property, it was nearly unrecognizable beneath the storm. The cabin stood dark and silent, partially buried in snow. For a terrifying moment, it looked abandoned. Rachel's voice cracked. "No, please." Ethan pushed forward, scanning desperately until he saw it. A faint, unnatural shape near the back of the cabin. A steel hatch, partially covered but still visible. "Here," he shouted, dropping to his knees and pounding against it with what little strength he had left. Jake joined him, both of them striking the frozen metal again and again, their movements growing weaker with each second. The storm howled around them, drowning out everything else. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, deep beneath the surface, there was a sound, a heavy, mechanical click. The hatch shifted slightly. Then slowly, it began to open, pushing against the weight of the snow above. A thin wave of warm air escaped into the freezing night. And in that moment, as the heat touched their frozen skin, they realized the one truth they had ignored for too long. Everything they had mocked was the only thing that could save them. The moment the hatch opened, everything changed. Marcus Hale stood there, calm and steady, as if the storm above didn't exist. Inside, now, there was no hesitation left in them. They stumbled down into the bunker as the hatch sealed shut, cutting off the roar of the blizzard. Warmth wrapped around them instantly. Jake collapsed to the floor, shaking. Rachel broke down in quiet tears, and Ethan stood frozen, staring at the space Marcus had built. Solid, organized, built for survival. While the storm raged above, destroying homes and burying the town, down here everything worked. Heat stayed constant, air was clean, and supplies were carefully managed. Marcus moved with quiet precision, treating their cold, giving them water, keeping them alive without a single wasted motion. Over the next few days, the storm didn't let up, but something else changed. The arrogance was gone. The laughter, the mockery, it all faded into silence. They finally understood. When the storm passed and the hatch opened again, the world above was devastated. Homes were damaged, roads gone, everything buried under snow. But Marcus's place still stood, because the real shelter had always been underground. As they looked back at the hidden entrance, no one spoke for a moment. Then Rachel said softly, "We thought he was crazy." Ethan finished quietly, but he was the only one ready. Marcus simply looked out at the frozen town. "Preparation isn't fear," he said. "It's survival."